every night. Sarah shut her laptop at exactly the same time, but her mind never seemed to shut down with it. Then, one rainy evening in Seattle, an old friend from Tokyo told her something strange. Sometimes, human eyes don't realize the day has already ended. Sarah laughed. It sounded ridiculous. But later that night, she still tried the small ritual his mother had practiced for years before bed. No medication, no meditation app, no supplements, just a warm towel. And strangely enough, for the first time in months, her mind finally began to slow down. Sarah Whitmore was 53 years old. She worked from home almost every day. To most people, that probably sounded comfortable. But the older she got, the more Sarah realized something nobody talked about enough. After enough years of working from home, it became harder and harder for her brain to understand that work was actually over. The dining table became a desk. The living room became an office. Her morning started with screens, and most nights ended with them too. Around 11 o'clock, her apartment would finally become quiet. No more meetings, no more notifications, nobody asking her to solve one more problem. But inside her head, everything kept running. Sometimes Sarah replayed tiny conversations from earlier that afternoon. Sometimes she reread emails in her mind, wondering if she sounded too cold or not professional enough. Sometimes she imagined tomorrow's problems before tomorrow had even arrived. Her eyes burned, her neck tightened, her shoulders stayed stiff for hours. And strangely, she still picked up her phone, scrolling mindlessly, reading things she didn't actually care about, as if silence itself made her uncomfortable. Some nights, Sarah felt like her mind was a room where the lights had never been turned off. Her body was exhausted, but internally, everything still felt too bright. Not the brightness of the apartment, the kind of brightness that comes from never fully relaxing. A few times, she even heard phantom notification sounds while her phone sat completely silent across the room. And the part that exhausted her most was realizing her body had wanted sleep for hours already. But her mind never truly ended the day. That night, Seattle was raining again. Tiny drops tapped softly against the kitchen windows. Sarah sat alone beneath a dim amber light, replying to an email that honestly could have waited until morning. Her eyes stung, her shoulders tightened again. She removed her glasses and gently pressed the space between her eyes. Then her phone rang. It was Kenji, an old colleague from Tokyo she had worked with years ago. The call was only supposed to last a few minutes. Instead, they talked for nearly an hour, mostly about getting older, sleep, stress, and the strange feeling of having a completely exhausted body, while the mind still felt fully awake. At one point, Sarah laughed quietly and admitted, "Every night I feel completely drained, but my brain still acts like it's 3 in the afternoon." Kenji was silent for a few seconds. Then he chuckled softly. "My mother in Japan always says something interesting." Sarah leaned back in her chair, listening to the rain beyond the glass. "She says, sometimes human eyes don't realize the day is over." Sarah smiled at first, but then she became quiet, because for the first time in a long while, someone had finally described what she'd been feeling inside. Kenji told her his mother had followed one tiny habit for years before sleep. No pills, no meditation, no complicated routines. Just placing a warm towel over her eyes for a few minutes before bed. Sarah almost laughed again. It sounded far too small to matter. But then Kenji added quietly, "After hours of bright light and stress, sometimes the face needs to be told the day is finally finished. And for some reason, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about that sentence. Later that night, she walked into the bathroom, not because she believed it would magically fix anything. Honestly, she was simply tired of fighting sleep every night. The bathroom lighting was soft and warm. Rain still brushed gently against the windows outside. Sarah turned on warm water and soaked a small towel beneath the faucet. Steam rose quietly into the air. The room was completely silent. She could even hear slow drops of water falling from the sink. Sarah stood still in front of the mirror for a few seconds, studying her own eyes in the dim light. The skin beneath them looked slightly swollen. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of exhaustion that quietly builds for months without anyone noticing. She slowly wrung out the towel. Steam drifted softly across the mirror. Then Sarah placed the warm towel over her eyes. At first, nothing happened. The thoughts were still there. Tomorrow's schedule, unfinished work, small unresolved problems. But after about a minute, something inside her began to soften. Not her thoughts, her face. The muscles around her eyes slowly relaxed, her jaw unclenched, her shoulders lowered slightly, and Sarah suddenly realized she had been physically tense all day long without noticing it. She stood there quietly for several minutes. No phone, no screen, no notifications, only warmth around her eyes and soft rain beyond the glass. And then, for the first time in months, Sarah felt her body beginning to slow down. In many homes across Japan and Korea, older generations still keep tiny nighttime rituals like these. Not as miracle cures, not as wellness hacks, just small ways of helping the body understand that daytime is over. Warmth matters, soft lighting matters, quiet matters too, especially around the eyes and face. After hours of staring into bright screens, the muscles around the eyes rarely get true rest anymore. The eyes feel tired, but they never fully relax, and when the eyes remain tense, the mind often stays alert with them. The warm towel didn't instantly put Sarah to sleep. It simply helped her body stop behaving like it was still the middle of the afternoon. And sometimes, that alone is enough for the body to finally stop holding on to the day. Sarah still had nights where she woke up, but something felt different now. Softer, quieter, less aggressive somehow. She stopped reaching for her phone the second she woke up, stopped forcing herself to sleep. About a week later, Sarah noticed something strange. Mornings no longer felt like survival mode. One rainy morning, she stood quietly in the kitchen, holding a cup of warm water. No television, no emails, no scrolling, just rain against the windows. She looked down at the first coffee of the day. It was still hot, and for the first time in a very long while, she didn't need to drink it immediately. Her mind felt slower than the world around her, and her body finally began to understand that night was finally allowed to feel quiet again. Maybe that's why so many older Eastern habits still survive today. Not because they're magical, but because they remind the body of something modern life keeps interrupting. Rest is something the body must be gently prepared for, not something that can be forced. And sometimes, healing begins with incredibly small things. A little warmth, a little quiet, and a few slow minutes before sleep. If this story felt familiar to you, you may want to stay for the next one too. Welcome to Eastern Body Wisdom, small habits, quiet nights, and the kind of quiet healing people once made more room for.